Hi, everybody. I'm Rebecca Tolan. I am a mind, body, and life coach, and I'm here with Michelle Wiegers, who's also a mind, body coach and a life coach and an advocate for chronic pain sufferers. Today, we're going to talk about stress related symptoms. So, this is often called mind body syndrome, or it was coined TMS, tension myositis syndrome, by Dr. John Sarno, who was really pioneering in that he realized a lot of the symptoms that plague us today, from chronic pain and chronic fatigue to headaches and digestive issues like irritable bowel syndrome, are actually caused by repressed emotions and the way our brain is processing stress. So the great news about that is that our brains are neuroplastic and they can shift, and we can recover from symptoms that we may have been told we just had to manage. So I'm really excited to talk to you today, Michelle, because you have healed from so many different ailments through this work. You are truly inspirational, and I really am excited to share more of your story with other people. So I just wanted to start out really by asking how and when your real pronounced mind body symptoms began.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that my story is a long one in that I had symptoms from childhood, really. And as a high schooler, I had some back pain, IBS symptoms, that kind of thing. Um, but they really landed strongly, um, where I was really dominating most of my life when I was in my early 20s. I had been married, I think maybe a year and a half, and was diagnosed with fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue. I was seeing my chiropractor 3 times a week. My back was in pain pretty much constantly. A lot of rest, a lot of pulling out of regular life and slowing it all way down. So that was when, at that period, that's diagnosed with fibromyalgia. That was when it really started to take over all of my life.
Yeah, so here you were married and you were going to go on to have four children. So you were in this great period of change in your life. How did these symptoms, specifically the fibromyalgia, which is where it really kind of blew up, how did that impact your life? Give us a sense of what your, you know, daily life was like with these symptoms.
Yeah, that's a really good question. It severely impacted my life. I wasn't working at the time. Well, that's not true. I was working, but then I remember just having to continue to reduce my hours. So I was working full time, and then I went to like 3/4 time, and then I went to part time. And then I told my boss, I can't work anymore. And he was like, no, you have to. You're amazing at this. I was working for a Hispanic ministry, working with Latinos in the town where I lived. And I, at that point, I stopped working. I did a lot of resting throughout the day. I can remember at one point feeling a lot of loneliness because I was isolated. It was a lot of shifting pain, like pain was in my back almost all of the time, but I would feel like tenderness and to touch in my head. I'd have aches throughout my body. The fatigue and pain kind of was equally severe at that point. And I remember asking my husband, hey, can we get a little dog? Like, I'm by myself all the time. And so we did. We got this little dog to be my companion at home. And I still would get together with friends and, do social events. But I kind of did it with one hand open, one hand closed. Like, will I be able to do it? Will I not? I'm not sure. Like, almost not even always being able to fully commit and just taking things as they went because of how much the fatigue and pain was affecting me at that point.
And I think, like, first you're dealing with the symptoms themselves, and just to feel that in your body every day is such a challenge. And then there's like all these other layers, just to lose this work that you loved and the sense of purpose. So there's a lot of losses that can happen with these symptoms. So how were you trying to treat these? I think that you were doing probably what a lot of people do, is looking at them as having a physical cause.
Mhm.
But tell us a little bit about that journey to try to resolve these symptoms.
Yes, that's a really good question. And there was quite a journey, but I went the normal route to my like regular practitioner who I remember saying to me, he said, I think you're probably depressed and you just need to get on depression medication and everything will be better. And I was like, I would tell you if I was depressed and I'm not. I'm really frustrated with these symptoms in life like it is. And so maybe sometimes I get down, but that's not the primary cause of all of this. So he wasn't listening, just like so many practitioners didn't. I was seeing a chiropractor who I was going to his office 3 to 4 times a week for treatments. And he had me like wearing a back support, like this Velcro back support underneath my clothes to hold my back in place to help the pain levels. Um, it was it was that practitioner who first mentioned, it's possible that you have fibromyalgia. And so I went to a rheumatologist, was diagnosed with fibromyalgia. Um, and then I kind of just went to various practitioners trying to find help. One of the main things I did was go to a naturopath in 2 hours south of us in a large city, Atlanta, Georgia. And so I went and saw him on a regular basis, and it included lots of different testing, some of them rather strange, temperature testing, all kinds of blood work and body mapping. I would leave every time with $600 to $700 of supplements that it was time to take for the next month. Every time I went, I mean, we were spending so much money. And really, I remember him saying, "Oh, you have fibromyalgia. It's just a magnesium problem. Just increase your magnesium, and that'll take care of it." And I was like, "Oh, great! That's the only problem." And yeah, well, that's not actually. I did take magnesium and a lot of other things, um, but it didn't change my
Yeah.
symptoms.
I can so relate to the whole supplement overdose thing. I think at one time I was on 30 supplements, and I remember saying to the practitioner, "Isn't this kind of bad for my liver just to process all this?" And, they just sort of keep adding stuff. So you then went on, I know, to experience a number of other diagnoses. Can you give us sort of a preview of that, some of the other things that happened that really impacted your life just as much, if not more?
Yeah. Um, so when I should say like a context, so those years before I had kids was kind of the fibromyalgia chronic fatigue years. Uh, about 5 years. And at that point, like super slow walks, I remember someone stopping me on the side of the road saying, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm okay. I'm going on a walk." And he was like, "Oh, it just looked like you're in a lot of pain." I'm like, "I am." So it was kind of one of those humbling moments, right? Um, so that's kind of a memory for me, and that really describes that period of my life really well. And then I became pregnant, which we didn't think I could. And I did become pregnant with our first child, and some of my symptoms improved. We were surprised by that. I was filled with a lot of fear about being pregnant with my first because I wasn't able to clean. I wasn't able to cook a lot. I wasn't able to do a lot of things. My husband just did everything. And here I was going to have a child. How was I going to take care of him? So there was a lot of fear going into that. But I would say my childbearing years, I had 4 kids in the span of 6 years, which was very quick. But my symptoms fluctuated through those years. And I did in that when I was pregnant with my third, go off gluten, go off sugar. So I was exploring all kinds of diets, like maybe this diet would help, maybe that diet would help as a part of treating the fatigue and the pain. So getting through those years, those childbearing years, there was lots of ups and downs. There were times when I was as disabled as I was before I had kids, and there was times when I felt a lot more normal. Um, so moving on from those like up and down years, I definitely experienced a significant spiral when my husband and I lived in the North Shore Boston area when he was in seminary. And again, I think I got some kind of virus that totally tanked me. I ended up in the hospital for about 9 or 10 days. They couldn't figure out what was going on. So there was something real medically going on, but it also scared my nervous system. like crazy because they were talking about, is this cancer? What's the problem? So as they're doing all these tests, my fear is just rising more and more and more. So in that, when I look back at that point, that was a very traumatizing time in our lives, and one that just spiraled me back into all of the practitioners. And I went to anyone and everyone to, like, I can't even list all of them. But from that period, I more changes happened in our lives, but eventually I was diagnosed with POTS, which is postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. I was diagnosed, which affects, for me, it affected like dizziness. If I sat up too quickly or stood up too quickly, I would get dizzy and sometimes fall. It affected my heart rate, those kinds of things. And I was also diagnosed with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a connective tissue disorder. And that's something that I still have. It causes hypermobility. I have type 3, which is a hypermobility type, and I still have that. But at the time, I thought that was the cause of all of my symptoms, my pain and fatigue and the other symptoms that I had. So these diagnoses over the years, IBS, fibromyalgia, EDS, POTS, I mean, they were just kind of this spiral going through all of these things. And really, when I got to the end of that season, well, that second or third season of being really disabled, that was the worst of it. So that was like in maybe 2014 through 17.
Okay.
Yeah. So that point, I was pretty well disabled, using a cane for assistance, not really shopping anymore, not really going anywhere. So life just got smaller and smaller
Yeah.
the longer I had these symptoms.
Yeah, and I want to mark a couple things that you were saying that, the symptoms would shift so much in intensity and also in location. And that's something, of course, we now know is very much a mind body indicator rather than some sort of physical cause, even though most physicians really aren't trained in this. And also, just that you said when you were going through a particularly traumatizing time, that's when the symptoms just really exploded, which we also know, of course, our emotions are really what's driving these symptoms. And then on top of it, you're getting all these diagnoses, which are really devastating. To be told that you're going to have to live with these things, and that sounds like it was furthering the symptoms. So I'm just completely empathetic to all this, and I can imagine it was a really scary, trying time. What was really the turning point for you?
That's a great question. So I have a friend who went through a lot of the same diagnosis that I did, and she reached out to me in the spring of 2017 and said, "Michelle, you're not going to believe this, but I'm feeling better." And I was like, "No, I don't believe this." And she said that she had gone through a book called Unlearn Your Pain by Dr. Schubiner. She had the same like gluten intolerant. Actually, she had been diagnosed with celiac. She had fibromyalgia, POTS, EDS, like literally chronic fatigue, all of the same things that I did.
Wow.
And she said she was doing so much better. She was buying hiking shoes because she was needing them for the first time in her adult life because she was able to be out in the woods again. And I was like, this is crazy. And at that point, I was really pretty well disabled at that point. And so I had actually just been recently measured for a wheelchair when she reached out to me. My doctor and husband and I, we decided that's what I needed next to help me re-engage in life instead of being so isolated in my home. And so when my friend reached out to me, it just was this jarring place of like, I can't believe that this could be causing this. And yet at the same time, I can't deny that she's better. And she
Yeah.
had the same symptoms and diagnosis that I did. So how could I not look into this? And really, I had also come to this place of just having accepted my diagnosis that I was disabled. And I was about to apply for disability with the state, even though I had delayed it for years and years. I was finally getting to that place. And so I think it was a combination of I had finally accepted, okay, all the things that I've tried are never going to work, and I'm disabled. And let's just figure out life from here. And then she chimes in with this mind body approach. So that's where I first learned about the mind body approach with Dr. Schubiner, Dr. Sarno. So I watched lectures of Schubiner's and some other videos from Sarno and read their books and found that a lot of what they're saying really resonated.
Wow. So, Dr. Sarno describes this as knowledge therapy, and he says really knowledge is the magic medicine in this case. And it sounds like for you, it really was. So, as you're learning about this approach through Dr. Schubner and Dr. Sarno, what started happening, and when did you notice your symptoms actually start to improve?
Well, there's two ways to answer that question, Rebecca. First of all, my symptoms improved really quickly. I took a span of a weekend to read and study, basically nonstop. And that next week, I decided I was going to try to go for a walk. I had not walked farther than like two houses down to a friend's house for tea with neighbors in a long time. And so that friend and I walked, and mapped it on my phone, and it was 3/4 of a mile that we walked that day. And she kept pausing and saying, "Michelle, are you in pain? Are you okay? Are you okay?" I'm like, "No, I'm fine. I can't believe I'm fine, but I'm fine." And so it was that moment of, because she had seen me spiral, and so had my other friends in that group. And so for me, applying the knowledge of this, living inside this safe place of like, this is not a physiological thing going on with me. There is something else going on. There's a learned neural pathway link going on in my body and mind. And it was so reassuring, the pain science. And also, I will say, like in those first few days, I was watching and listening to lots of testimonies. So other people's healing stories, along with my friends, but others, just listening to their story and how they healed helped me believe, oh, maybe I could too. So that was the initial phase where I very much like had this, almost, it felt like an immediate reaction. Within a week and a half, I was doing things that I hadn't done in months and months, really years. And then I'd have symptoms come back in. So it was like an initial relief, which was huge. And then it was this process of really retraining my brain. First, that had to do with me working with different triggers, like, which are like associations in my life. Some of us were in my own house and environment. Some were the things that I ate, or activities that I did, or even stressful situations I would be in. Different things would trigger symptoms. And so it wasn't like this easy breezy, now I know it all, and now everything's fixed and done in a week. It was more like, now I had to kind of make a map of what actually is going on in my body and what causes what reaction. And so that was like the next phase of healing.
And I'm so glad you said that, because sometimes we hear about people who have the book cure where they'll read the Mind Body Prescription or one of the books by Sarno and they'll just recover. But I think we don't always hear the rest of it, because I had such a similar experience. Someone with my exact symptoms healed through this work, told me about it, and I started running around the block after having chronic fatigue syndrome for years. But then symptoms came back because, as we've since learned, we have these neural pathways in the brain that are still sort of firing in a certain way. We have to retrain. So then what was the next phase for you? What did you do that was really most impactful in shifting the symptoms and kind of stabilizing yourself in a higher level of well-being?
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. So I definitely used the trigger work and the knowledge in the beginning. I then moved into expressive writing through the context of Dr. Schubiner's book, Unlearn Your Pain. And I'm a creative writer and poet, and I was using the practice of morning pages to just write regularly, which is a practice taught in The Artist's Way book by Julia Cameron. So I was using traditional expressive writing, but also just a stream of consciousness type journaling. And that was bringing up all kinds of things for me from my past, because I really, so much of what disabled me was unhealed trauma and repressed emotions in my body that were being trapped in my body. And I had gone through lots of counseling, so it wasn't that I hadn't addressed those issues, but what was true is that they were still living inside my body on so many levels that I wasn't aware of until starting this work. So at that point, I took one look at Dr. Schubiner's thick workbook and said, I'm not doing this alone. I'm going to find someone to work with. And because it really was, it was overwhelming to try to unpack, because now I know that my brain was really coming to my defense and protecting me, right? And so when the brain is protecting us from all of these things, it can be hard to tear down those walls by alone. And so creativity helped me, expressive writing and journaling helped me. And then I started working with an ISTDP therapist. And she and I worked for a good 9 straight months. And then we took like a 2 or 3 month break and worked for another 6 to 8 months. So it was about a 2-year time where she and I worked together. She helped me see what I couldn't see because I had a lot of blind spots. She helped me with reconnecting with my body, reconnecting with my emotions, not shutting down when I felt anger or fear or grief, but being present to those and listening to both my body and my emotions in a different way. So that was kind of like the third phase of healing in a way for me, is working with her.
And I think, and what I'm really hearing too is this self-expression and emotional expression through the writing and the therapy were so pivotal for your healing. And a lot of people will often ask, well, do I have to go back into all my old traumas? That just seems like too much. And of course, our brains have been protecting us from them for a reason. But I was really intrigued by something you just said, that she was helping you learn to be with your emotions more and in a different way now. So did you feel you really had to go back into kind of all those dark closets of your experience, or was it more just learning to interact and allow your emotions differently in the present day?
That's a really good question. And you're right. There are a lot of people who can heal their mind body symptoms without going back to traumatizing events in their childhood or earlier adulthood. So for me, it was a mix. I did go back to some experiences, and I also needed help navigating my current experiences when symptoms would rise up. Like there was a period, I think, where I had 2 weeks where every morning I had back pain, I could barely move. And then I would start to get moving, and then it would kind of go away again and sort of tweak throughout the day. And then at night it came again. Okay, what is going on? I know that this is my body. I don't know how to stop it. So having a therapist where I was working with her and she was helping me understand how what I teach now and what I think is really what was happening is that I was going through emotional experiences in my present life that were very emotionally similar to what I experienced in the past. They weren't as severe or as traumatic, but there was some kind of similarity that my brain went, uh-oh, we know what this is. We're not going here. And so my brain went into the protective shutdown place. So I needed the time and space to understand really how my nervous system and how my danger signal response, that survival response, how it tends to get triggered and what triggers it. That was really helpful for me in understanding why I would have bouts of anxiety or physical symptoms again, that kind of thing.
And I feel like with you, your recovery has been so profound. Just to know you and get the chance to work with you and see how much you're doing is so incredible. How much you've recovered from and how much you're thriving today. And my sense is that it was like really understanding the knowledge that you were not sick, you were not broken, understanding what was happening in your brain, but that you really did all this deep emotional work. And that really took away any real cause for the brain to create symptoms, right, of different kinds. So I wonder if you could maybe say a little bit more about that and also let us know how you are feeling today.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Sure. So yes, for sure. That for me, diving into the deep emotional work was important for me to really reestablish the sense of safety for myself. I realized probably midway through or towards the end of that work that out of my deep wounding, I'd really surmised this phrase that the world is not a safe place and the people in it can't be trusted.
Mm.
And I was living from that belief. That was a limiting belief for me. It wasn't true, but I was living like it was true. And that's really living from a place of PTSD,
Yeah.
um, where you just live out of that fear place. So it took time for me to work out, okay, I can trust my husband, even though he's a wonderful person. I'm still like working with trust and in relationships, right? Or I can trust these friends or these family members or even my own children. And so it's not that that was a permeating truth throughout my life. It was just more like when things would get triggered, it was the danger fear trigger response. So for me, definitely the knowledge was my way in initially, and working with the triggers then expanded my healing. But the deeper experience of working through my emotional traumas in the context of expressive writing, my expressing myself creatively in poetry and other writing, and working with an ISTDP therapist, those three were like key for really bringing me to the place I am today. And I I really don't experience symptoms today. There are times when, if I'm having a more stressful week, I may not sleep as well and be like up for an hour. Though insomnia wasn't really a key struggle area for me when I was sick, I definitely present that way now. But that's a common stress cause, right? Or response. So that will happen sometimes. Sometimes my back will feel a little bit tight, and um, especially first thing in the morning, once in a while, I'm like, oh, but it's not something that happens very often or for a long period of time. So I mean, I'm recovered. I've returned to my normal life. Um, I'm able to exercise fully. I'm able to work full time for the first time in my life. I'm not only working full time, I'm running my own business. I'm launching all kinds of creative efforts and doing a lot of what would be stressful kinds of work that I really believe in. And my body and my emotions aren't falling apart. And that's what would have happened to me before. So I am incredibly grateful for this journey and to be where I am today and to be working with others like you, Rebecca, and others who know this story, know this work, and the power that it can have to set us free. So
Yeah.
maybe it
Well,
was a long
you know,
answer.
it's just remarkable because I see that you're teaching this work to other people, you're coaching in your mind body coaching practice. And to hear your story, I really get the sense not only did you work through a lot of the emotions, but you got to that really deep core limiting belief that the world is a dangerous place that was informing everything else. So you went down to that very subtle foundational level, and that's shifted everything. And I really see that you offer that to people in the work that you do, the opportunity for them to find that. So, on that note, I just would like to ask what you would like to share with listeners about the work you're doing today, and any other really words of encouragement for people that are struggling with these chronic stress related symptoms.
Yeah, thank you. I do love this work. I will say the week that I healed initially, that through the knowledge, I will never forget. I was sitting in a coffee shop with my journal. And I was like, instantaneously, the thing that I want to do is help other people heal. That's what I want to do for the rest of my life. And I wrote this 3 pages of why, and I put all of these points down. And then all the emotions hit, and I was like, I can't do this. I don't know. I thought I was healed, and now I'm really struggling. And so then I spent the 2 years with the ISTDP therapist, and then I started training as a coach. So my initial just gut heart level instinct was, this is my work. This is my calling. And then I went into like, I got a lot to learn before I start helping others. So I do love working with clients and students who are in their own chronic pain or fatigue or symptom story, and trying to work through the TMS and mind body knowledge. So I work with one-on-one clients, and I do some group coaching. I also teach a mind body course called How We Heal Chronic Pain and Fatigue, with you, Rebecca, and with another mind body coach. And I am this year in 2021 launching a new website called howweheal.us, which is going to be a place for learning, creating, and healing in the context of a nurturing environment online. And there's going to be a lot to come there. That, I believe, is my main advocacy work in this year, is to create a space for others to learn from a host of different mind, body, and artistic creatives and teachers. So creating more and more space for healing and for growing. It helps me continue to be who I want to be, and to create openings for others. So what I really feel called to is to be an opener, to open the way for healing for others, and to let them find their own journey. I absolutely believe there's not one strict way that you have to heal. If your story doesn't look just like mine, it doesn't matter. You can still heal. And that's why I want to create a space that has a lot of different offerings so people can find their way in. So my encouragement is always to trust the process, that if you're still struggling in pain, to trust that your process is yours and that you will continue to find what you need in order to be able to heal. And maybe that's working with a coach. Maybe that's really just talking with a trusted friend or someone else who's on their own healing journey. Maybe you need a community to learn inside of, and maybe you really just need to do this work alone. You find your best context, you trust that process. And there's a lot of surrender and a lot of following. So that trust, surrender, follow is definitely a mantra and prayer that I've prayed throughout my life. And it's something that I encourage others as they're entering their own healing to do the same.
Michelle, I'm so grateful that you're in the world and you're in my life. You truly are really an inspirational person. And I see you offering this very up close and personal and living it in the same way that you teach it. So I know people can find out more information about Dr. Schubiner's work and this whole approach on your website, michellewiegers.com. And I am sure that people will find this interview really inspirational in their own healing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rebecca. I really appreciate getting to share.